Hello, hello, everyone. It's me, Arden Lee. I am back today with another video. And in today's video, I want to ask you, are you a critic or are you a builder? And I'm going through this process myself as I am becoming more and more of a builder. It is calling me to release more and more of the parts of myself that are still being a critic. So this is kind of new stuff for me. So as I move into this new territory, I want to let you in on my process while my thoughts around it are so fresh, so that you can also witness that for yourselves and see what about it is feels applicable to you. So if you're not already familiar with me, my name is Arden Lee, and I am the creator of the Repatterning Project, and that's an 8-week course where we hack our beliefs and start to use our choices to fine-tune our realities so that we can optimize our lives for more success, more abundance, more happiness, more fulfillment. We examine those tiny moments and we zoom out and see the overall patterns that are comprised of all those tiny moments and how they are forming our lives as a whole. How can we use our daily, everyday choices and our beliefs and all the things that we align ourselves with in order to achieve greater conscious awareness of those things that we're doing, and in order to fine-tune them to really come into alignment with the goals that we have for ourselves. So if that sounds like something that you're into, go ahead and check out the description box. And there is a link to a free PDF guide about the Repatterning Project. There is also a link to the Facebook group, the Repatterning Parlor. Go ahead and check that out, and it's free to join, and I moderate it. So come join, come say hi, and yeah, check it out, see if it's right for you. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the discrepancy, the dichotomy between being a critic and being a builder. I used to think that I was a real builder, because I was someone who, even in previous years of my life, I was someone who was, I was a published author as of 2011. I, formed a band the following year. I started working on my musical project. But I never really committed to much that took a lot of responsibility. I've talked about that in a couple of my other videos where I had some trauma from being involved in a former industry where being responsible to people, having people depend on me, especially as clients, ended up going particularly wrong for me in many ways. And that caused me to, even though I was great at entering into fields where I could share my thoughts, or like publishing a book, for example, or whatever, or maintaining a blog. It was always something that some people could kind of like take or leave, and I was never really responsible for a container, right? So now I've got my Facebook group, I've got the clients that I work with, I've got people who sign up for my course. And in all of this, I'm really leaning into being so much more of a builder than I've ever been before, because all of a sudden I am responsible for things, right? It is one thing for me to just, kind of put my thoughts out there on a blog or whatever. Yeah, sorry, my cat is trying to climb onto the table. No, you being good? Okay, sorry. So I had to stop my last video and start re-recording it again, even though I was several minutes into it, because Virgil jumped up on the table, and he is not allowed to do that. So I'm just checking on him. Anyway, so as I'm becoming more and more of a builder, I'm releasing more and more of my inner critic. And my inner critic was someone who was looking at the things that other people were building and constantly calling them out for being problematic, or for expressing viewpoints that I felt were harmful. I still think that to a large extent this is really important, because we want to make sure that people are being accountable to the greater good in the work that they're doing in the world. And if someone is doing harm, we don't want to enable that. And even though it's nice for us to be nice about it, especially when it's our friends involved, ultimately we're not doing anyone any favors if we just kind of allow this harm to perpetuate. It's kind of like, you know, if there were no one resisting our current administration, that would be bad, right? Speaking up about what is problematic is absolutely partly, it's absolutely a great part of our responsibility as a citizen of the planet, in my humble opinion. However, there is also a certain amount of sympathy that I am coming into having for people who are building larger and larger things, and in their process of building have a hard time being accountable for every single detail. Now before, maybe even like up to like right now, I would have been like, if you can't be accountable for every detail, then you shouldn't be building something. But the truth is that with the scale, the way that the scale is in this world, it's just not quite possible to do things that way. If you're going to have to remember every single detail of everything that you're building, then that doesn't allow you to scale to a certain point where you can actually trust, say, like the people who are working for you, for example. And so, so I was on the phone with my business coach the other day, Adam Lyons, who's a dear friend of mine, who is also a former colleague and also now my coach when it comes to running a business. I was on the phone with him and I was complaining about all of these systems that I apparently have to memorize in running a business. I was like, there's automated emails. I don't understand that. There's figuring out like what, 3-4 different ways of processing payments. You know, I have to figure out which bank accounts those things are going to. I was like, this feels like memorizing 5 different choose your own adventure books at once. And here's what he said to me. He said, Arden, there's always going to be issues that come up that you're going to have to deal with from parts of your business that you don't necessarily understand. That place that you're looking for where everything just runs perfectly is never going to happen for you unless you stop. I mean, he didn't say this part, but I'm adding it. Unless you stop at a point where you can still retain all that memorization, right? I guess that's the choice. And he asked me, he said, how did you feel about the whole Mark Zuckerberg Facebook scandal? Were you on Mark's side, not on Mark's side? And I was like, fuck Mark Zuckerberg. That's irresponsible. I can't believe that he sold our data to Cambridge Analytica. And he says to me, okay, here's a challenge of a mindset that I have for you. He says, anybody I know who owns a business, even if it was wrong and fucked up what happened, even if the situation itself was bad, anyone I know who runs a business of a certain scale felt sympathy for Mark Zuckerberg. And I was like, fuck anyone who feels sympathy for Mark Zuckerberg, right? Because of course I'm me. And he explained to me, he said, listen, Facebook has over 1,700 employees. To be able to know at every single hour of the day what all 1,700 of those employees are doing is impossible for one man. So you notice that when he went on trial and he sat there and he was giving testimony and he went and I guess, testified before the government, there were a lot of questions that were asked of him where he said, I don't know, I'm going to have to look into that. I'm not sure, let me ask my people. And Adam said to me, that's really what it's like at that point to run a business of that scale. Yes, there are systems that you can learn, that you can memorize, but Arden, this never stops. This never, if you're going to scale to a certain point, then there's never a way to have absolute control over every single thing. I feel this sometimes similarly when, for example, I'm putting out a whole bunch of content, right? I've got 2 Facebook groups that I moderate. I've got the course that I've created. I've got another group where I run retreats. It's called Witch Haven. It's, it's a little more woo. It's for people who are into magic and manifesting, and it's for women or femme-leaning people only. Although I certainly, if you fit that description, I certainly encourage you. If that sounds like your jam, you can go and look up that too. Just find my Facebook and Witch Haven. It's every Wednesday I post a live class in there. So so just scroll to my Facebook till you get to a Wednesday, and you'll see a link to the group. So I do that, and of course I also have my band. So there's a lot of things that I'm juggling at once. And for this project alone, for this aspect of my life and my business and my career alone, I make 10 YouTube videos a week. If I had to comb through each of my 10 talks that average anywhere between 12 and 30 minutes each, and make sure that every single sentence that I said could not be interpreted as being problematic when taken out of context, that would be impossible. It would be impossible for me to keep building at the rate that I'm building. Now, I have a lot of accountability to myself. I have a lot of accountability to my integrity. That's the reason that I feel I'm able to do this work in the first place. So you'll even notice sometimes I'll be in the middle of giving a talk and I'll say something and I'll be like, no, that's not right. That wasn't the right way to phrase that. Let me redo that again, right? I don't even bother editing because that would slow me down. I just correct myself in the moment so that I make sure that I'm understood, right? But the point is that if I believe that everything that I put out there is, if I expect every single thing that I say to be held up to such intense scrutiny that every single sentence is true, even when taken out of the context of the video, then that leaves me no room to keep building. I would not be able to make 10 talks a week and plus do all the other work that I do on top of that. So I'm starting to get to a place where I have more sympathy for people like Mark Zuckerberg. Do you believe that, right? And I have more sympathy for the people that in the past, perhaps, I would call out and criticize because maybe I didn't do a good enough job acknowledging all of the stuff that they were putting out there that did have value, and I just stepped in when I felt like they were saying something problematic, right? That's another thing too. There are people who follow me that I start to notice that trend in them as well. And that they never show appreciation, that they never comment positive things, that they're really just looking for, I don't want to assume what they're looking for, but the only comments they make are things that they perceive as being negative. Oh, you worded this the wrong way. Oh, you shouldn't share that website. Oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And meanwhile, every time I look into it, they're not someone who's building their own thing that people are getting anything out of. They're not someone who is creating something to have impact in the world. They're not someone who is calling in a lifestyle of abundance. They're just sitting there being critical. And we know this already, like we understand, like, okay, yeah, there are people who make movies, and then there are people who sit there from their having never gone to a day of film school in their lives, who like to sit there and say how they would have done it better. We already know that in theory, but it gets really it gets down to a nitty-gritty point that I'm really examining now, because having sympathy for Mark Zuckerberg is not a thing that I thought that I would be called to do. But clearly, even if I can say the situation was not handled well, and Facebook behaved irresponsibly, and bad things happened that should have been checked on, I can also look at Mark Zuckerberg as a human who is trying to hold this whole corporation of 1,700 people. I'm also I'm seriously not a big fan of Facebook right now, especially because of their new terms of service that are quite frankly homophobic and sex negative and swerfist. Sex worker, exclusionary, radical, feminist. I don't think they're even feminists. I think they're just bigoted against sex workers. And all this is in response to SESTA and FOSTA. And I also have sympathy for the fact that that all platforms, you know, Tumblr included recently, are now looking at their content more and more because they don't want to get in trouble. And you know, with the SESTA FOSTA compliance, which is the bill that curtails advertising of any kind of sexuality on the internet, to the point where Facebook is like, if you state your sexual preference in a post, we will assume that you are soliciting, and that is against our terms of service. Like, it's really pretty fascist, you guys. It's really pretty bad. So Facebook is like not my favorite thing. But at the same time, I also have sympathy for the fact that our idiotic administration pushed through this bill, you know, that could make these corporations liable for the content that appears on their sites, and that they're also just trying to protect their asses and do their own business as normal. We would need to make sure also that our anger is directed in the right place. You know, I don't believe in them. I don't believe that what Facebook is doing is right, but I also can have some sympathy. Hi, Virgil. Did you decide not to jump up on the table today? That's very good. It's better to come over here than to jump on the table. If you're going to interrupt my video, at least let people see how cute you are, right? Oh, look at, there's your little face. So I'm not defending any of their decisions. What I am saying is I have more sympathy for how much responsibility you take on when you do build something, and how responsible you become to your container, and how much work you end up doing. So, you know, I am noticing now the people who are popping up in my feed only when they want to say something negative, and not acknowledging all of the work that I'm doing to try and have a positive impact in the world. And it's pretty fucking annoying, you guys. It's really irritating. And that discrepancy between whether you're a critic or whether you're a builder is coming more and more to light every day. Because the more and more content that I produce, and the greater and greater containers I am responsible for, the more possible it is for there to be a fuck up or a slip up, or for something to get misinterpreted, you know? And I make it my job to stay present, because of course I want to be as within my integrity as possible, and I'm not going to use an excuse for that, you know? But I also am starting to see where there are people who, I'm not going to say that they are actively looking for things to criticize, but I'm going to say that their confirmation bias toward the world has allowed them to put themselves in this role of critic, because they're seeing problems everywhere. Because again, the law of attraction is essentially hacking our confirmation bias, right, you guys? We've been over this in other videos. The thing that you put into your center, the thing that you focus on, will be the thing that you see more and more of in the world. And if someone is constantly seeing what's wrong and what's problematic, that can get them to a point where they are nitpicking tiny little details, practically looking for arguments and things to pick apart, and not building for themselves. And if they were building something for themselves, then they would have more empathy toward people who are holding so much responsibility between the content that they have made a promise to themselves to produce and the containers that they have promised to hold space for, that they would have more empathy for that, and for how superhuman it can feel to never make a single mistake. That doesn't mean that mistakes or fuck-ups are excusable. It just means, oh my god, you guys, I was just talking about making mistakes, and then the camera app on my phone shut down in the middle of this video, and now there's a little glitch in the middle, but that's all right. Anyway, the thing that I wanted to say is just that I want to bring awareness to the fact that if the thing that we are putting as central to our confirmation bias, the thing that we are focusing on, is constantly calling people out or criticizing or saying what's wrong with this, what's wrong with that, we're not allowing ourselves the space and energy to build something that's going to make make an impact, a positive impact on the world. And also, we're not allowing ourselves the empathy required to allow for there to be mistakes that we can then be accountable for, or that then we can, go through and work out or bring clarification to. Because if our own mindset is that we're never allowed to make a mistake when we're building things, then that's going to unconsciously also keep us from building things too. And certainly for me, I'm looking at that and I'm like, yeah, you know what? I wouldn't trust myself to at this point to run a company with 1,700 employees, because it would be impossible for me to know what all of them are doing at all times, and whether something had happened that went wrong. But right now, that's also the reason that I'm not Mark Zuckerberg. And I'm thankful I'm not Mark Zuckerberg, but if I ever want to get to the point where I can scale that big, I need to have that empathy, and I need to work on giving myself permission to build the thing, and trust that that mistakes are human and mistakes are part of life. And while I want to be accountable for those things, I'm not going to be so afraid of of being taken out of context, or what have you, or not understanding all my systems, that I don't allow myself to scale in that manner. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. When I checked in with my coach, I told him a story of where someone had called me out for something that I felt was kind of silly and should have been a common sense issue, and he was like, yeah, there's there's always going to be those people. That is part of running a group like this. That's part of running a business. That's part of being a public figure and being outspoken. And they will be very few, but they will be vocal. And the way that you choose to deal with that is up to you. And at the end of the day, I have to say, yes, okay, I can handle criticism. I can look at things, but if it really looks like people are just looking to find the mistakes with everything and never saying anything positive, then I have to take that with a grain of salt too, because at the end of the day, I want to be the person who's building and the person who's making an impact, not the person who's sitting there watching the film and talking about how they would have made it better. So if you're also someone who is looking to grow in that capacity and you want to make that impact on the world, I invite you to allow yourself the room for that empathy, the room to everyone I know who's grown a business has gone through that phase where they've said, I have to let myself be okay with making mistakes if I'm ever going to grow. It's as cheesy and as simple as that. We have to allow ourselves the room to make mistakes if we are ever going to grow. And a lot of this call out culture, even though there is so much that is positive about all the changes that we are facilitating in society now and calling for more sensitivity and calling to be better, there are certainly places and people in which anything can be weaponized. Even social justice can be weaponized. And I hate even saying that because I love social justice, but anything can be weaponized. And there are people who will use the language of wokeness to try and bring you down or be critical. And again, I just invite you, if that happens to you, I invite you to look at where those people are in their lives. Are they someone that you would want to be taking advice from? And most of the time, I look at that and my answer is no. I want to be someone who is calling in success and abundance and making a grand scale impact on the world. So if someone is calling me out and I'm looking at them and not seeing them do any of the things that I want to be able to do for myself, I'm going to take that into consideration. It's not going to be a final judgment because maybe there's something for me to learn there. But at the same time, I'm not going to be in paralysis around not being able to control every single aspect of what I do, or worry that I'm going to make a video and that there's going to be a sentence in it that someone interprets the wrong way or whatever. I'm going to do my very best, but I'm not going to allow myself to be paralyzed into inaction by that. So that is my invitation to you. Are you a builder or are you a critic? Because at the end of the day, we only have so much bandwidth, and being a builder takes a fuck ton of bandwidth, you guys. I don't have the energy, I don't have the space to be a critic anymore, or it's very rare anyway. And when I do want to be a critic, I just come on and I make a video about it instead, so that way I'm doing both at the same time. All right, thank you guys for listening. I hope this was helpful. I'll see you next time.